Shift towards the facilitative role of L1. Now, what we witness when we look back at the research done over the years is that there is a shift, a gradual one though, towards now presenting the first language in a more facilitative role. It was realized that the first language was only one aspect of the errors that the learners were making when they were learning their second language. And over here, we also need to keep in mind that contrastive analysis also failed because the time involved in comparing two whole systems of language was too massive. And not only massive, the results that they were giving were also inaccurate. So there had to be a time when this would be sort of become outmoded. So there came to be this shift that the errors are, yes, there are some errors that come from the first language of the learners, but they are not the only errors. And those same errors can be explained in other ways also. But then the question is, what is the role of the first language? Well, the first language was seen as transitional competence. It acted as competence in language, and it helped the second language in terms of transition. So as they were learning the second language, they relied on their first language, as we do in our real life. Whenever we are learning a new thing, to make sense of that new thing, we rely on the knowledge that we already have about other things. So we say this new computer is just like an iPad. And we know iPad and we don't know how it works. It works just like that. So we are using our old knowledge to build new structures, and this is what we call transitional competence. Then attention was now was being paid to the language of the learners. They said the language that the second language learners were using while they were learning this second language could be identified as idiosyncratic dialect. That means it's not the target language, but it's simply a different language. It is an approximate system, a system that is near to the target language. It is almost like a target language, but it is not the target language. And this can be actually a language in its own right, what they called interlanguage. And this term, as we know, as we have gone through your textbook, also somehow stuck with the learners, and this is how it was described. So the researchers also said that first language was one of the 5 processes at work that led to learner errors in this interlanguage system as it was being developed. Corder said, well, first language is the basic grammar on which the learners are drawing upon. So it can be seen, this basic grammar, the first language grammar, can be seen as one at the start of the continuum, at the start of the journey when the learners move to the second part of the continuum, that is to the second language learning. So they initially use it, and the transfer that occurs from the first language while on their journey to learn the second language is actually a strategy. It's an important strategizing mode by which they make a hypothesis, they make their own rules, they make their own assumptions to explain to themselves how the second language is actually working, and then they use the second language and then they test their hypotheses or assumptions. So Corder said, second language is not negative transfer, but borrowing. So you're borrowing from what you know to understand what you don't know. You're trying to constantly think what is it like and what it is not like to make sense of the second language. And this borrowing is important borrowing, and it's a psychological phenomena that has to happen. So when the learners are learning a second language, they can't simply erase or shut off their first language. The first language is kind of a knowledge structure that is there, and then because it is there, it has to have some influence. And this influence is not always negative, but the learners are actually using it as a tool to learn the second language.